The evening the Duke of Everley entered Ashbourne Hall, three sisters arrived prepared to be chosen, while another woman came only to pour the tea. No one expected the quiet figure beside the silver tray to become the center of England's most whispered conversation. Beneath the golden glow of chandeliers, where crystal glasses shimmered and silk gowns moved like waves, ambition filled the ballroom more strongly than perfume. Mothers measured fortunes, daughters measured glances, and every heart waited for the moment when Duke Julian Ashford would reveal whom he favored. For years, the Duke had been regarded as the most desirable unmarried gentleman in England. His estate stretched across green valleys and ancient forests, his name carried influence in Parliament, and his wealth was spoken of in every drawing room. Yet behind the elegance of his title lived a man tired of being admired for everything except himself. Society saw a duke, few saw the lonely soul hidden beneath the formal coat and controlled expression. Tonight, however, everyone believed they understood the future. The Beaumont sisters had been presented as the perfect candidates for his hand. Lady Arabella Beaumont, the eldest, entered first with confidence that seemed carefully polished. She possessed beauty that turned heads and a talent for conversation that made even strangers feel important. She knew exactly how to laugh, when to pause, and which subjects would remind the Duke that she belonged among the powerful. Her younger sister, Lady Celeste, carried a different kind of charm. She was graceful, intelligent, and admired for her musical gifts. Many believed her delicate fingers upon the pianoforte could create emotions no spoken words could express. She entered the room like a melody, leaving behind admiration wherever she walked. The youngest, Lady Eleanor, possessed the sweetness society adored most. Her innocence appeared effortless, her smile bright enough to soften stern faces. She represented everything romantic novels promised young ladies should become. Together, the three sisters seemed like a carefully arranged portrait of perfection. Standing several steps behind them was Miss Clara Beaumont. She was not a daughter seeking a husband. She was a cousin of the Beaumont family, invited to assist with the evening's arrangements. Her gown was modest compared with the elaborate creations surrounding her, her jewelry simple, her presence so gentle that most guests looked through her rather than at her. Clara had learned the painful art of becoming invisible. She knew how society treated women who possessed neither fortune nor remarkable beauty. They were useful but unnoticed, praised for being agreeable but rarely remembered. While others practiced elegant phrases before mirrors, Clara spent her time ensuring flowers were arranged correctly, servants were treated kindly, and elderly guests never sat alone. No one applauded such things. No one considered kindness a quality worthy of a duchess. When Duke Julian entered Ashbourne Hall, the entire room changed. Conversations lowered into respectful whispers. Fans moved faster. Eyes followed him as he crossed the polished floor beneath the candlelight. He wore authority naturally, but there was a weariness in his gaze that revealed how little joy he found in admiration. Arabella approached first, offering a brilliant conversation about foreign affairs. Celeste later impressed him with her knowledge of poetry and music. Eleanor captured attention with youthful warmth. The Duke listened politely. He smiled when expected. He thanked them with perfect courtesy. Yet something remained distant in his expression. Then, almost unnoticed, his eyes moved toward the tea table. There stood Clara. A nervous elderly countess had been struggling to speak with younger guests who ignored her. Clara quietly brought her a chair, adjusted her shawl, and listened as though the woman's memories were the most valuable stories in the room. She asked for nothing in return. Julian watched. For the first time that evening he saw someone who was not performing. When Clara realized the Duke was approaching, she lowered her eyes immediately. She was accustomed to serving important people, not speaking with them. "Miss Beaumont," Julian said gently, "I believe I have not yet been offered tea." She looked surprised. "Forgive me, Your Grace. I did not realize you wished for another cup." "Perhaps," he replied, "because everyone else has been too eager to offer me something, while you were the only person considering what others needed." His words unsettled her more than any compliment could have. Before she could answer, her hand trembled. The porcelain cup slipped slightly, sending a few drops of tea near his glove. The ballroom froze. A mistake from an unnoticed woman became entertainment for everyone watching. Clara's face turned pale. "I sincerely apologize, Your Grace. I have caused embarrassment." But Julian did not step away. Instead, he looked at her with unexpected warmth. "Do not apologize for having a gentle hand, Miss Beaumont," he said. "It is a rare thing in a world where everyone is determined to leave a mark." The silence that followed felt louder than music. For the first time in her life, Clara was not invisible. The Duke asked her for the next dance. A wave of disbelief moved through the ballroom. The sisters stared. Guests whispered behind fans. The woman who had arrived to serve tea was now standing beside the most powerful man in the room. But as Clara placed her hand in Julian's, she did not notice the jealous eyes watching from across the hall. Lady Arabella had seen the Duke's choice. And in the shadows beyond the ballroom doors, she held a secret about Clara Beaumont's past that could destroy everything before the first dance was finished. Yet Clara knew nothing of the storm gathering around her. She only felt the strange kindness of a man who had looked beyond appearances and recognized the quiet truths she carried. Across the room, Arabella's expression hardened, for she understood that the Duke's interest was not a passing curiosity. It was a choice, and choices made by Dukes could change the fate of families forever in ways no one predicted. After the unforgettable evening at Ashbourne Hall, the world outside the ballroom changed for Clara Beaumont faster than she could understand. The same society that had ignored her for years now spoke her name in every drawing room, yet the attention she received brought little comfort. Some voices called her fortunate, while others sharpened their words with cruelty, claiming that a quiet companion had somehow bewitched a duke. Clara discovered that being noticed could be almost as painful as being forgotten. Duke Julian Ashford, however, seemed untouched by the storm of gossip surrounding them. He continued his visits to the Beaumont estate, not with the arrogance of a nobleman inspecting a possession, but with the curiosity of a man discovering a rare and precious truth. He asked Clara about the books she loved, the gardens she tended, and the people she helped when nobody was watching. Their conversations became the moments she secretly treasured most. Julian had spent years surrounded by people who measured every sentence according to advantage. Clara spoke without calculation. She did not flatter him, fear him, or attempt to impress him. She treated him simply as Julian, a man carrying burdens beneath a title too heavy for one heart. One afternoon, beneath the quiet shade of the estate garden, he handed her a small wrapped parcel. Clara hesitated before accepting it, certain it was too generous. "Your Grace, you must not give me gifts merely because you feel responsible for the attention I have received." Julian looked at her thoughtfully. "You misunderstand me, Miss Beaumont. I've spent my life giving gifts to satisfy expectations. This is the first gift I have given because I wish to express gratitude." Inside the parcel was a delicate porcelain teacup painted with small blue flowers. Clara recognized it immediately as similar to one she had admired during a childhood visit to her grandmother's home. "You remembered?" she whispered. "I remember everything about you that others overlook," he replied. The simple confession touched her more deeply than any grand declaration could have done. But happiness rarely arrives without opposition. Lady Arabella Beaumont watched the growing connection between them with increasing bitterness. She had always believed that beauty, education, and social grace were the qualities that secured a woman's future. Clara's unexpected rise threatened everything she believed about the world. Yet jealousy was not the only reason Arabella opposed the match. Hidden among old family papers, she had discovered information about Clara's father, a man whose reputation had been destroyed years earlier by accusations of dishonesty. The scandal had faded with time, but the stain remained. Arabella knew that if the truth became public, society would question whether Clara deserved to stand beside a duke. At the next gathering, whispers followed Clara through every corridor. "She may have captured his attention," one guest murmured, "but can she carry the weight of his name?" Clara heard every word. She had endured being ignored, but she had never expected to become the subject of such public judgment. She began wondering whether Julian's affection was placing him in danger. That evening, as rain traced silver lines across the windows of the Beaumont residence, Clara found the courage to speak with him privately. "Your Grace," she said softly, "I fear I have brought trouble to your door." Julian turned from the fire and studied her expression. "Trouble? Your world has rules I was never taught. Every day I remain near you, people question your judgment. They question your honor." He stepped closer, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "Miss Beaumont, the opinions of others have followed me since birth. I was praised before I had earned anything and judged before I had failed. Their voices are not what concerns me." "What does concern you?" Julian paused. "Losing the one person who has ever spoken to me without wanting something in return." The honesty of his words left Clara silent. For a moment, the walls built by years of insecurity seemed to weaken. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that perhaps she was not merely a temporary fascination, not merely a rebellion against society's expectations. But the secret waiting in Arabella's possession grew closer to destruction. The following morning, an anonymous letter arrived at Everley House. It contained accusations against Clara's family and warnings that the Duke's reputation would suffer if he continued pursuing her. Julian read the letter once, then again, his expression becoming colder with every line. When Clara learned of its existence, she understood the danger immediately. She had spent her entire life protecting others from her own pain, and she could not bear the thought of Julian losing everything because of her. Before sunrise the next day, she wrote a letter of farewell. But as she prepared to leave, Julian arrived unexpectedly at the estate, holding the same blue-flowered teacup she had cherished. "I will not allow strangers to decide the worth of the woman I love," he said. Clara froze at the final words. "The woman I love." Yet before she could answer, a carriage stopped outside the gates, carrying a visitor from Clara's father's past. The stranger held documents that could clear her family's name, or reveal a truth powerful enough to separate Clara from the Duke forever. The arrival of that mysterious figure changed the fragile peace they had found. Julian looked toward the doorway, his hand still wrapped around the precious teacup, while Clara felt the past she had buried rising before her. She had spent years believing silence could protect everyone she loved, but now silence threatened to take away the only happiness she had ever known. The visitor slowly removed his gloves and revealed a sealed envelope bearing her father's name. Inside waited the truth that would decide whether Clara Beaumont became the future Duchess of Everley or the woman who walked away from the man who finally saw her heart. And no one knew what the pages would reveal. The sealed envelope bearing her father's name rested upon the table like a forgotten ghost from another lifetime. Clara Beaumont stared at it beneath the candlelight, unable to move. For years, she had carried the weight of her family's disgrace quietly, believing that some wounds were better endured than reopened. Now the past had returned, standing between her and the only man who had ever looked beyond her silence. Duke Julian Ashford remained beside her, his expression controlled but his eyes revealing concern. The world knew him as a man of authority, someone who could command rooms with a single glance. Yet in Clara's presence, his certainty often disappeared. She reminded him that strength was not always found in power, but sometimes in the courage to remain gentle. The visitor introduced himself as Mr. Thomas Whitmore, a former legal advisor to Clara's father. His arrival carried the atmosphere of unfinished business. He explained that years earlier, Clara's father had been accused of misusing funds belonging to a charitable foundation. The accusation had destroyed his reputation, isolated his family, and left Clara with a name society quietly questioned. But Whitmore revealed a different truth. The evidence against her father had been altered. Financial records had been manipulated by men who feared his discovery of their own corruption. Clara's father had not stolen from the foundation. He had uncovered the theft of others. Before he could expose them, they destroyed him first. Clara listened in silence, tears gathering in her eyes. She had spent so long accepting the world's judgment that she had forgotten what it felt like to hope for justice. "My father always said the truth would survive," she whispered. "I believed he was only comforting me." Whitmore lowered his gaze. "He was comforting himself as well, Miss Beaumont. He knew he might not live to see his name restored, but he believed someone would eventually have the courage to seek the truth." Julian reached for Clara's hand. The gesture was simple, yet it carried a promise deeper than words. "You should never have carried this alone," he said. Clara looked at him sadly. "I feared that if you knew everything, you would see me differently." The Duke's expression softened. "I have spent years surrounded by people who hide their flaws behind perfect appearances. You showed me a different kind of nobility. You carried pain without allowing it to make you cruel." His words broke through the final barrier around her heart. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to believe she was not a burden. However, the discovery of the truth did not end the danger. The men responsible for the old deception still possessed influence, and they would not surrender their power easily. News of Whitmore's arrival spread quickly through aristocratic circles, and those who once whispered about Clara's family now searched for ways to silence the revelation. Lady Arabella, who had once intended to use the scandal against Clara, began to understand the cruelty of her own actions. She had wanted to defeat a rival, but she had nearly helped destroy an innocent woman. For the first time, jealousy gave way to shame. She visited Clara privately. "I owe you an apology," Arabella admitted. Clara looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I believed the world's opinion before I believed your heart." The confession did not erase the pain between them, but it marked the beginning of forgiveness. Meanwhile, Julian prepared to reveal the truth publicly. His advisors warned him that challenging powerful families could damage the Everley name. They urged him to protect his reputation and distance himself from controversy. But Julian remembered the woman standing beside a tea table while everyone else competed for attention. He remembered the kindness she showed when nobody was watching. He made his decision. The announcement would not be an apology. It would be a declaration. Before the ceremony, Julian found Clara alone in the library. Rain fell against the windows, creating a quiet rhythm beneath the flickering firelight. "I am afraid," Clara confessed. "Of what?" "That tomorrow, when everyone hears the truth, they will say I used your affection to restore my family's honor." Julian stepped closer. "Then let them say it. People who have never known sacrifice will always misunderstand those who have suffered." She looked into his eyes. "And if they turn against you?" A faint smile touched his face. "Then they will finally learn that a duke can survive without their approval." Clara's heart trembled at his certainty. Yet beneath their hope remained one final obstacle. The men who destroyed her father's name had learned that Whitmore possessed proof, and they intended to stop the public announcement at any cost. The next evening, Everley Manor filled with nobles, politicians, and families who had gathered expecting a simple declaration. Instead, they would witness a battle between reputation and truth. Clara stood beside Julian beneath the glow of countless candles, holding the blue-flowered teacup he had given her as a reminder of the night he first truly saw her. But just before Julian spoke, a messenger rushed into the hall with a sealed document. The room fell silent. The message was from one of the men responsible for Clara's father's downfall, and it contained a final accusation. Julian opened the letter slowly, unaware that its contents could change everything. Clara watched his face lose its calm expression, and for the first time she wondered whether the truth she had waited for all her life might bring not freedom, but another devastating loss. Julian lifted his eyes toward Clara, but he did not speak immediately because he understood the danger hidden within the pages before him. The accusation was not merely an attack upon her father's memory, it was a carefully planned attempt to destroy Clara's future before the world could accept her. Yet Clara remained beside him, and in that silent moment Julian knew one truth. Whatever awaited inside the document, he would face it with her and never alone. The great hall of Everley Manor had never held so much silence. Hundreds of candles burned beneath the carved ceilings, their flames trembling as though they sensed the tension gathering among the guests. The most powerful families in England had arrived expecting an announcement of obedience, reputation, and tradition. Instead, they were about to witness a duke challenge the very world that had created him. Duke Julian Ashford stood before them with Clara Beaumont beside him. The sealed accusation remained in his hand, yet his expression was no longer uncertain. He had spent his entire life being shaped by expectation. From childhood, he had been taught that a duke belonged not to himself, but to his ancestors, his estate, and the society that protected his name. Every decision had been measured by duty. But Clara had taught him something no title ever could. A man who sacrificed truth to preserve admiration possessed nothing worth preserving. The document in his hand contained the final attempt to destroy her. It claimed that Clara's father had not been an innocent victim but the architect of his own downfall. It accused him of hiding financial crimes and suggested that the evidence discovered by Mr. Whitmore was fabricated. The room waited. Some guests looked at Clara with sympathy. Others watched with the eager curiosity of people hoping to see a dream collapse. Clara felt every gaze upon her. Years of judgment had taught her how to endure cruelty without complaint, but standing beside Julian in that moment required a different kind of courage. She knew one speech could change everything. She knew the aristocracy rarely forgave those who threatened its comfort. Yet when she looked at Julian, she did not see a powerful duke. She saw the man who remembered her favorite teacup. The man who listened when others ignored. The man who had chosen her when choosing someone else would have been easier. Julian slowly opened the document. "Before I speak of this accusation," he began, his voice carrying across the hall, "I wish to speak of something far more important." The guests leaned closer. "For many years, I believed honor was found in protecting a family name at all costs. I believed strength meant never allowing the world to see uncertainty. But I was wrong." His eyes moved toward Clara. "Honor is not found in hiding the truth. It is found in defending it." A quiet murmur traveled through the crowd. Julian revealed the evidence gathered by Whitmore. Original records, signed statements, and proof that powerful men had altered documents to protect their own fortunes. He explained how Clara's father had uncovered the corruption and how his enemies had destroyed his reputation before he could reveal their crimes. The room changed. The whispers that once carried suspicion now carried disbelief. The truth that had been buried for years had finally reached the light. But Julian was not finished. He turned toward the families who had judged Clara. You questioned whether she was worthy of standing beside me, he said. You measured her by wealth, appearance, and history. Yet not one of you saw what I saw. His voice softened. You saw a woman pouring tea. I saw a woman offering kindness when she had every reason to become bitter. You saw someone without influence. I saw someone with more dignity than many who possess titles. Clara's eyes filled with emotion. No one had ever defended her so openly. No one had ever believed her so completely. Then came the moment society had expected least. Julian took Clara's hand. I will not choose a wife according to the wishes of a kingdom of expectations, he declared. I will choose the woman who reminded me that my heart was still my own. The hall fell completely silent. Miss Clara Beaumont, he continued, I ask you not to become Duchess of Everley because the world approves of you. I ask because I cannot imagine my world without you. A wave of emotion passed through the room. Clara had dreamed of being accepted, but she had never dreamed of being chosen so completely. For years, she had believed love belonged to women who were beautiful enough, wealthy enough, or important enough. Julian had proven otherwise. She answered quietly, yet every person heard her. Your Grace, I do not wish to stand beside you because you defeated those who opposed me. I wish to stand beside you because you have always seen me as I truly am. A smile appeared on Julian's face. Then stand beside me, Clara. Not as someone rescued. Not as someone rewarded. But as my equal. The declaration changed Everley Manor forever. Even those who opposed them could not deny the power of what they had witnessed. The Duke had not protected his reputation by sacrificing love. He had protected his honor by choosing truth. Later that evening, as the guests departed and the candles burned lower, Clara returned to the small tea table where their story had begun. The same place where she had once been invisible now felt transformed. Julian joined her. You realize, he said softly, that everyone in England will speak about this night for years. Clara smiled faintly. Will they remember the truth? They will remember that a woman everyone overlooked became the reason a duke found his courage. She looked at the blue-flowered teacup resting between them. I never imagined something so ordinary could change my life. Julian reached for her hand. Neither did I. But perhaps the greatest things are often found where nobody thinks to look. Yet beyond the warmth of their victory, another change was beginning. The families who had once dismissed Clara now watched her with new respect, and the world that had rejected her was preparing to witness her transformation. But Clara knew becoming a duchess would bring challenges of its own. Winning Julian's heart had been only the beginning. Now she would have to enter a world that had once tried to break her and prove that the quiet woman beside the tea table was strong enough to change it forever. The morning Clara Beaumont became Duchess of Everley arrived not with the overwhelming grandeur she had once imagined, but with a quiet beauty that felt far more meaningful. Soft sunlight entered through the tall windows of Everley Manor, touching the roses arranged along the garden paths and illuminating the halls where generations of noble families had walked before her. For the first time, Clara entered those rooms not as a forgotten companion or a woman standing behind others, but as the heart of the house itself. Yet even as the world celebrated her transformation, Clara carried a memory of the woman she had once been. She remembered standing beside a tea table while elegant ladies passed her without a second glance. She remembered the painful whispers, the judgment in strangers' eyes, and the belief that her life would always remain on the edges of someone else's story. Now those same people bowed when she entered. But Clara did not allow admiration to change her. She understood something many aristocrats had forgotten. A title could open doors, but kindness was what made people welcome you inside. Duke Julian Ashford watched her closely during those first months of marriage. He had expected challenges from society, but he discovered the greatest change was not how others treated Clara. It was how Clara changed Everley itself. She noticed the servants who had spent years being overlooked. She remembered the names of gardeners, cooks, and stable workers. She opened the estate's resources to families who had struggled through difficult winters. She created schools for children who had never been given opportunities. Some members of the aristocracy criticized her. They claimed a duchess should concern herself with appearances, not ordinary lives. But Julian never doubted her. One evening, as they walked through the gardens beneath a silver moon, he watched Clara stop to speak with a young servant girl who had been afraid to approach her. You realize, Julian said afterward, that half of England believes you are changing the duties of a duchess. Clara smiled gently. Perhaps the duties needed changing. He laughed softly, a sound few people had heard from him before Clara entered his life. You know, before I met you, I believed power meant being untouchable. And now, Now I believe the strongest person is the one who allows others to feel seen. Their marriage became something society had never expected. Not a powerful alliance. Not a perfect portrait of aristocratic success. But a partnership built upon trust. The three Beaumont sisters also found peace after the events that had transformed their family. Lady Arabella, once consumed by the desire to be chosen, learned that admiration without compassion was an empty victory. She apologized publicly for the harm her jealousy had caused and became one of Clara's strongest supporters. Lady Celeste devoted herself to music and charity, using her talent not to impress the wealthy but to bring comfort to those who needed it. Lady Eleanor remained closest to Clara, often reminding her of the night everything changed. The entire room was watching the Duke, Eleanor once said. But he was watching you. Clara smiled at the memory. He saw something I did not even see in myself. Years passed, and the scandal that had once threatened to destroy Clara became a distant story. The world that had questioned her family name eventually celebrated her strength. People no longer called her the quiet woman who poured tea. They called her the Duchess who changed Everly. But Clara never forgot the beginning. One autumn evening, many years after that first unforgettable night, Everly Manor hosted a grand gathering. The ballroom was once again filled with chandeliers, music, elegant gowns, and whispered conversations. Clara stood near the same tea table where she had once been invisible. A young noblewoman approached her, nervous and uncertain. "Your Grace," the girl said, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." The young woman glanced around the room. "How did you capture the heart of a duke when so many others tried?" For a moment, Clara looked toward Julian. He stood across the ballroom, older now but carrying the same warmth in his eyes that had first surprised her years before. She turned back to the young woman. "I did not capture his heart," Clara answered softly. "A heart cannot be taken like a prize." The girl listened carefully. "I simply stopped pretending to be someone I was not, and he was brave enough to love the person he found." Before the young woman could respond, Julian approached. "Am I interrupting?" Clara smiled. "Only a conversation about how impossible it was for you to ignore me." Julian looked amused. "Impossible? I recall you trying very hard to disappear. And you refused to let me. Because you were never meant to disappear." His words carried the same tenderness they had held years earlier. The ballroom continued around them, but for a moment they were transported back to that first evening. The trembling teacup, the shocked silence, and the unexpected choice that changed everything. Julian took Clara's hand. "Do you know what I remember most about that night?" She looked curious. "The tea." She laughed softly. "No. The dance." "Not even that." He looked at her with quiet affection. "I remember a woman who had every reason to be bitter, yet she was still kind." Clara felt the familiar warmth of those words. Because that was the truth of their story. She had not become a duchess because she learned how to enter a ballroom. She had become one because she never lost the grace she carried before anyone noticed her. Outside, the gardens of Everly bloomed beneath the evening sky, just as they had on the day she first arrived. The house that once belonged only to tradition now belonged to compassion, hope, and love. And when future generations spoke of Duke Julian Ashford and Duchess Clara Beaumont, they did not remember the scandal, the whispers, or the rivalry between three sisters seeking a title. They remembered a duke who looked beyond beauty and ambition. They remembered a woman who proved that quiet hearts could hold extraordinary strength. They remembered the teacup that changed the fate of a duchess. Because sometimes the greatest love stories do not begin with a grand entrance. Sometimes they begin with someone standing quietly in the corner, offering kindness to a world that has forgotten how to notice. And sometimes, the person everyone overlooks becomes the one person nobody can ever forget.